history of social clubs. Didn't know a lot of those people hung out with each other.
It's crazy. Like, this is one of those things that people don't realize, is that like most of the time when there have been pockets of exceptional people, they have been like very literally connected to each other. And there's all these different places.
That's why the Illuminati is real, man. You didn't add the Illuminati.
I mean, Illuminati, like, right. The Illuminati is like a great example, and everyone likes to, but there's like at all points of history when there were like sort of like intellectual movements or science or like, wisdom or like all these different sort of spheres, art, they were always like coming together and like actually literally hanging out with each other. And because they all came together, like everybody in that sort of small circle ended up being better for it. And so, yeah, like the Stein Salon is like one of my favorite examples, because they just had so many rock star artists all together. Was
that the one with like Virginia Woolf and
No, that one was, the Virginia Woolf one, and like John Maynard Keynes.
Keynesian economics.
Yeah, exactly. They were cool. They were like pushing very interesting social boundaries. But there was the one, they were like in Paris, and it was like Gertrude Stein basically just like had a shit ton of Picasso paintings, and she was like friends with Picasso and Matisse and like whatever. And so then they would come, and then this is like if you've ever seen Midnight in Paris, that movie, it's all sort of like centered around that group of friends who were all like hanging out together. And then there were like writers who were starting to join as well, American writers. And it's just one of those things of like exceptionality compounds on itself, if that makes any sense. Like when you are an exceptional person and you hang out with other exceptional people, and like you're sort of exchanging ideas and perspectives and like how you view the world, it has this like compounding sort of snowballing effect. And if you keep everybody around, right, if you keep everybody sort of coming back and like constantly reintegrating their new perspectives with each other, really, really magical things happen.
I would be curious though as to the factor that, like, I imagine a lot of these people were also similarly affluent in their respective times, and so how much that might have contributed to their individual success. I'm sure that like being able to bounce off of other artists, creatives, and like philosophers definitely would have helped. But having this baseline of either wealth or independence, financial independence, should
yeah. It's a good question. I mean, I'm trying to think back. So like, one of the examples that I mentioned in the post was Benjamin Franklin and his like Juntos, right? And those were definitely not affluent people.
Where does the word Junto come from, by the way? Sorry to interrupt.
I think it's like a Spanish word for together or something. It's like or maybe it's like coming together or like collective, or it's like I think it's a Spanish word that has like a sort of derivation from the sort of like idea of collectivity. I don't know exactly.
Political grouping or faction. 17th and 18th century Britain.
Okay, yeah.
From junta of the Spanish nouns ending in O. So yeah, you're right.
Right, yeah. So he had those, and that was just like a social club that was not particularly affluent, from what it seems like, and that also seemed to serve some useful function. So that is one counterexample. The other one that comes to my mind though is just like, and I don't know the artists whether they like started off poor, but I know that like when the sort of Stein Salon, when they were like first coming to be, these artists were not like wealthy. They were not successful. You know what I mean? They were like kind of poor, and so
Picasso still had his ear.
They
like an amateur.
They weren't like so poor that maybe, I don't know. The short answer is like, I don't know. The long answer is like, yeah, the safety net probably did help to some degree, but I do think that there's some value, regardless of wealth, just like the idea of, like getting all these people together.
Collectivization plus like networking. I imagine they were able to connect people with like patrons or, people who are willing to invest in, a person's craft or, whatever they're going for.
Right, exactly.
Which is definitely like, I mean, even in modern day, like Greek life and like business, a lot of like business positions, I think like So like 60-70% of like presidents have like been connected to Greek life or masonry in some way. Uh,
Yeah, masonry in the United States is a big one. Yeah,
yeah, it's definitely interesting.
it's. I think it's just one of those things that there's power. Like networks are valuable, you know, and like communities are valuable. And I think this is something we're starting to see, where, like, in a world that, how do I explain this? You know, I think what we're going to start to see a lot is, like, in a world where like there's this competition for
Hmm.
attention, right? What you really are optimizing for is like long-term relationships, right? People sticking around, you know, within like communities or within, you know, sort of groups or whatever. Like you want like longevity,
Hmm.
because that's where you know people are like taking, but then they're also eventually giving back. And if you're around for long enough, that's like possible. Um, and so that's like, I think that's going to be a big sort of like factor here as well, is like, how do you, and this is sort of what also underpins our thesis with Michael, is like, how do you build communities that are sustainable? How do you like make sure people are sticking around, constantly giving back and contributing and like whatever? And our thesis is that that starts with like fair ownership of the community, where, you know, it's not like a subreddit where like, you know, Reddit owns the subreddit and then like, I don't know, a couple moderators moderate it. You actually in theory have like everybody in the community sort of like
Hmm.
co-owning the subreddit depending on their degree of involvement. And so that keeps them coming back. That like gives them sort of an incentive to stick around rather than just like leaving to start their
It's kind
own.
of like
Or,
direct
you know, a lot of these
direct
things.
equity in like whatever organization
Yeah,
they're starting.
right, exactly. Because, you know, so much of the time, like, it's just really hard to retain people, right, with these things. And so, but if you can retain people and if you have like longevity, then like you sort of propel yourself into success. Like if you stick around long enough, you'll like eventually win. Is sort of the like thesis. And I think that's true. Like that's sort of true for even like the Masons, right? Like I think they've been around for like ages and ages, and, you know,
Hmm.
I think before the Masons were Masons, they were like Illuminati and all this stuff. And they like, you know, the like governments like tried to get rid of them, and then they like didn't. And then, you know what I mean? You
Yeah,
sort of
yeah.
like, if you stick around for long enough, like you eventually like become a household name. You like eventually sort of make it. Um,
You become the reason why people are
so I
wearing
think,
tinfoil in their heads,
right, exactly, exactly.
and that's a
So
win in
our, you know,
itself.
our whole thing is like, right. So it's like, how do we help anybody launch their own Illuminati,
Hmm.
right? Like in a world of secret societies, like how can anybody have the freedom to be able to do that, to like organize together, sort of in private. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah.